Hello, Canucks fans. Welcome back to the Canucks Speakeasy. I'm Pete. I'm back in Vancouver on terra firma, and with me, as always, is Doug and Brendan, aka Jabo. We got a full house today, guys. It's good to see everybody.
It's good to see you not in a bar in the middle of Bolivia.
I'm still amazed that I actually got to enough of a reception there to join you guys from the
That was
pals
good.
there.
That was good.
That's a Canucks podcast first, I think.
Probably of any Canucks podcast. No one's ever done one from the middle of a bar in La Paz, Bolivia.
It worked well. It worked well. Doug, how's things?
Good, man. Can't complain. The Canucks, despite everyone complaining about their play, have been winning games and getting points. And yeah, man, life's good right now being a Canuck fan. What about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I'm back, so it's been a week or so getting back, and the first game that I watched was the Egg against Boston. And I was like, oh, great, they didn't lose in regulation.
Oh, it's you. It's your fault, right?
Well, I think they went they played 10 games, I think, while I was away, and I think they went like 8-0-2 or something.
8-0-2. Yeah.
During those 10 games. So of course, my first day back is that, but now they haven't lost in regulation again since then. So that was the only one. I mean, it's funny how we talk about this being a rough stretch, and they still like 2-1-1 in their last four or something like that. And I think for me, I just kind of feel like it's a rougher stretch because a lot of our big boys have been quiet, and we've been getting carried by this third line and Niels Höglander and a couple other guys.
It seems to go you go game by game, and it seems to be it's someone else. You had the game in Detroit. Yeah, they lost it in overtime, but Pettersson's line with Höglander obviously on it, having a game, and then obviously the game in Chicago, you have the third line. And the third line even, haven't been scoring consistently, but they've been doing everything you need them to do consistently, which is possess the puck, create offensive zone time, and allow yourself to set the table for your first and second lines to come out there and continue the momentum that they've created. So, I mean, really, that's the nice thing about that third line is it's not just the fact that they're scoring at a rate that no one saw coming. It's the fact that they do everything else right, even when they're not scoring. And not to mention, you got Bluger and Joshua, who have both been mainstays on a penalty kill that just continues to get better. And everybody's all concerned about what's going to happen next year and all that. And I'm just obviously we're all thinking about it. Who are they going to prioritize? Who are they going to try to sign? Who's going to go? And because somebody's inevitably going to go. But for now, you just enjoy it for what it is, which is arguably, well, probably not even arguably anymore, for the last 2 months since December, the beginning of December, the best third line in the NHL, and it's probably not even close. They're playing really like a top six line, which is why I always kind of brush back at people and I'm saying maybe they're not a third line. They're playing as well as the second line. So it's really a nice positive for this team that they have 11 double-digit goal scorers, and we're only 53 games into the season. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but we've got a lot of games left. And if you look back at the 2010-11 team, they only had 9 double-digit goal scorers through a full 82. So this team's winning a lot of games, and probably the best way to sustain winning, along with being good defensively, which is this team is having that goals and the scoring spread around to more than just one or two lines. So a lot of positives.
Yeah, I also, the other thing I think the third line deserves a lot of credit for is drawing penalties. They've been really good at drawing penalties,
sure.
and I know the Canucks power plays struggled a little bit lately, and I actually liked that Tocchet started for one of the power plays in the game against Chicago. He actually started the second unit, which I thought was good. I think it's good to kind of get the second unit a little bit more time and kind of get their confidence up on the power play. But yeah, right now, I know also you brought up who do they prioritize? I believe it was Rick Dollywall said that he believes that Teddy Bluger will be their kind of target to prioritize,
center,
and then
right? Center.
exactly, and it makes sense. And Dakota Joshua's been a revelation. I mean, I think he was found money last year. We were saying this on the podcast, and this year he's even upped his game again, despite being called out at training camp by Tocchet and the coaching staff because Tocchet wasn't happy with, I'm assuming, his conditioning when he came into training camp. And Dakota Joshua took it like a professional and, got to the level that he's playing at now, which is great.
Consistency as well, right? Consistently.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's arguably been one of their better penalty killers. That was another thing you brought up. And he's like how good he's been on the penalty kill.
I didn't see that really coming with it. I mean, it's not even just positioning. It's his ability to read the play, and read plays to get himself or his stick into passing lanes or shooting lanes and to intercept pucks. And I mean that level of hockey IQ, I don't know if I necessarily saw that coming because, I mean, my God, the guy's showing that level of hockey sense that, we may have questioned when they first signed him. I mean, what kind of a player is he? I mean, he's definitely in that sense been really definitely a revelation, especially on the PK. I remember there was that one game. The game in Dallas that the Canucks had that 2-on-0. But it was the plays leading up to that 2-on-0 when they were 3-on-3. Him reading the play, stealing a pass, and that led to that too. I mean, his hockey sense is so much better than I ever thought that it could be. And hats off to him and to the coaching staff, to the Sedins who I know put in work with them, I mean, because they've really done a good job of getting the most out of him for sure.
I think as well, Detroit game, they started PP2 a couple times after a bit of a rough start for PP1. So this is something over the last 2 games. And I think this also might be a little bit of load management that we're seeing here on the road at this kind of, little pocket of the season. I mean, if you look at some of the ice times, it's pretty spread out right now. You're seeing some of the top guys getting less time as you get ready for this stretch coming up where you got Winnipeg a couple times, you got Vegas, you got Boston, you got some big teams coming up that's really going to kind of test your mettle. So you get teams that are more middle lower of the pack like Detroit, Chicago. You can kind of play around with it a bit. The whole Teddy Blueger, Dakota Joshua, who do you sign? I mean, obviously I want to sign both. My vote was for Joshua. I know he's not a center, but I also think with the way Podkolzin is playing, I think a lot of management and coaching is looking at Podkolzin coming
and
up
that's the thing, right?
Yeah. Being a replacement for
you can replace wingers, right? It's harder to replace that center who can win draws and kill penalties. You not even just Podkolzin, but I mean Arshdeep Bains as well. Who
I was going to bring him up as well, yeah.
Which I really think he's probably the more comparable to replace Joshua, just because he does kill penalties, and Podkolzin hasn't necessarily killed many penalties down in Abbotsford.
Well, I think the guy that they're really watching right now, top prospect Phil Kessel, Phil the Thrill. You got a 39-year-old prospect down there. This is, I mean, obviously, this is a guy who's a short field depth piece if he gets a deal here. But that's another guy down in Abbotsford now that's causing quite the stir over the last 24 hours. And Van, what do you guys think of Kessel? I'll say for the record, I got no issue with it in a league minimum depth piece. He was on Vegas last year and it worked well. He's a good character guy. Players seem to love him, brings a lot of experience. And again, you got a guy. Yeah, I mean, look at who you're kind of shuffling around right now in your 12 forward. You got Neil Zaman, Phil DiGiuseppe, Sam Lafferty's been a little bit in and out, Linus Karlsson. Why not chuck Phil Kessel in with that group? For me, I got no issues with it. What do you guys think?
Well, I got a text message yesterday at around 11, 12 o'clock from a buddy of mine saying, "Hey, I've got a buddy on a plane. Phil Kessel's on a plane to Vancouver right now." And I'm like, "Shut the fuck up." And I'm not gonna say anything about this until you send me something to confirm that it happened. And then of course he sent me a photo showing him that he was in the he was with his sticks and everything at the airport. So that was an interesting, because I mean, I guess we always sort of knew that this was a possibility, and yeah, I mean, I've got no issue with it. I mean, apparently today in Abbotsford he had his first practice, and not surprisingly, he was a little gassed and winded during rushes and drills, which, I mean, no one should be shocked by that. I mean, even if you're doing that kind of stuff on your own, it's, when you get into more of a team scenario like that, it's probably gonna test you a little more than what you're doing on your own. So we'll see. I mean, if he figures it out, if his fitness is at a level that they think that he can play, I mean, he's not a bad 13th forward option, and he's got 3 Stanley Cups. He's a guy that people love, as you said, Pete, and you could do a lot worse of an option, because you get the feeling that they're looking for maybe that sort of a piece as just to fill out their forwards, and then probably a defenseman, just to give them some depth.
Yeah, he's a free addition, right? So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like it costs you nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
If you haven't committed anything to him as of yet, 13th forward makes sense. And going into the playoffs, what does every team need? They need depth. One of the reasons why Vegas was on such a great run last year during the playoffs was they were fully healthy. They didn't have any real major injuries. Guys like Teddy Bluger, who's a contributing member to this current Canuck team, and obviously Phil Kessel, they were extra forwards. They didn't even play a lot of the playoffs. I think Bluger played a little bit, but in that Stanley Cup final, neither one of those guys sniffed the ice. And I don't think that's necessarily an admission to Teddy Bluger as a hockey player or Phil Kessel as a hockey player. I just think that team was healthy from game 1 of the playoffs to the final game of their championship win. And they had guys that were younger, faster, and played the style that the Vegas Knights like to play that could do that a bit better than Bluger and Kessel. And obviously there's the tie with Rutherford and Tocchet. Tocchet was known as the Kessel whisperer in Pittsburgh because I believe Kessel and Gino Malkin got into a bit of, again, I'm sure, they got over it, but there was a couple of times when I think it was Kessel was yelling at Gino for something, I don't know, and Tocchet was the guy that kind of would pull Kessel aside and calm him down and get him to refocus and stuff like that. So there's a relationship there, which I think is great. And I do think, if he's going to play in your top 6, because I don't really see him as a bottom 6 player on this team, it doesn't really make sense. But you maybe slide a guy who has played very well, but you slide a guy like Pius Suter down to, the bottom role. Maybe he centers your 4th line and you put him with a Lindholm, or you put him even with a Petey, because Kessel can finish. And that is something that has kind of been missing on Petey's wing this year. Kuzmenko wasn't really finishing his opportunities this year. Mikheyev as well. And Mikheyev's a guy that I do think might secretly be on the market to potentially bring back a defenseman. And maybe this is why they're looking 2-3 moves ahead and they're looking at potentially bringing in a Kessel. But that, again, I'm going a little bit off track there. But yeah, it's a free player, essentially. It doesn't cost you a draft pick. It's just money, and you still haven't even really committed anything to him.
I think they're looking at least at what the options are with Mikheyev. I think one of these things that this management group has done is they're always looking to improve, right? Like, I mean, you can even think of some moves that they made, like acquiring Sam Lafferty. Or, of course, bringing in Zadorov when he flipped Beauvillier, and we've seen kind of some of these moves in action before. But it makes sense not just for this year with Mikheyev, who's been fine, but he's not scoring, and he's been up and down the lineup. I thought he was good last night, but it makes sense to at least explore the options. And remember, that's more money off the books than for the next 2 years, where now all of a sudden, if you get rid of a guy like Mikheyev and you bring in a guy who is UFA at the end of this year, it makes it a lot more possible to try and sign both Bluger and Joshua.
Yeah, it's going to be, I mean, this off season is going to be, as I heard one person say today that the team next year could look very different, than it does this year, just because they have all options, and when and that's not a bad thing. When your team is good, it gives you options. Teams want your players, and that can't be forgotten. So who's off the table? I don't think there are going to be many players in this offseason that are necessarily off the table if this organization believes that moving them gives them a better path to maybe flipping some of this roster around a little bit. Because let's be, I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, you don't want to do too much because this team is on its way to possibly winning a President's Trophy. So I mean, a lot of that is a ways off, and again, like I said, I'm just enjoying the fact that this team has three lines, and it's going to give the opposition things to think about. Who do we match up against here? Is it as simple as just matching lines 1 and 2, and then letting the third line have its sort of a little bit of a softer matchup? Or is it going to come to the point where this third line is playing so well that you're going to have to maybe match up against them and then give a little bit of a softer matchup to either Miller's line or Pettersson's line? I mean, those are the questions, and especially as we get closer to the playoffs and into the playoffs, knock on wood that nothing crazy happens. But what do teams do? How do they match up against this team? Because it's not just one or two lines. Because and I'll be honest, this forward group is deeper than the 2010-2011 team is.
It just is. So. Yeah, that group was very top heavy, and then it was a lot of depth and grit behind it. This is actually like, I think about the game last night. Yeah, I know they're basically playing an AHL team in Chicago, but there was a series there. I believe it was the first period. Well, I read in Chicago didn't get any shots till like the last 30 seconds, but there was just wave after wave. The Canucks were rolling 4 lines, and every line was going in there. And we got to give credit to the fourth line too. Whoever is on there, it is a useful fourth line. Like gone are the days of some of these Canucks fourth lines where it's like, where are they now? It's a definitely a who's who of Canucks outcasts, kind of like your background there, Brendan. And that's kind of gone now. When you can put out a fourth line that maybe looks something like, I don't know, like Suter, Lafferty, and Mikheyev, that's a very useful fourth line. It is a deep forward core, and we saw that as they abused Chicago last night, especially for some long stretches there where Chicago just couldn't get anywhere and the Canucks swarmed them. And that's the thing going forward here is they're going to try to get Lindholm, and everybody's trying to be quick to have their opinions on Lindholm and how he's looking, and I'm just like let's give him some time. And that's the nice thing of where they put themselves right now is they've given themselves, and you don't want to fiddle with the lineup to the point where you start losing and you give up what that sort of lead that you've built in your division. But it does give you the opportunity to try things, see where the best fit is for Lindholm. What line does he make sense on, and is it with Miller, or is it with Pettersson? Does Hoglander remain a top 6 forward? And certainly from an offensive point of view, he's giving Tocchet every reason to think that he will be. Obviously, I think Tocchet has some reservations in terms of his consistency over a 200-foot game. But I mean, no one will argue that even that area has come a long way from where it was this time. Or I mean, I guess he was in Abbotsford this time last year, but at the beginning of last season, where he just seemed a little bit lost. So it'll be interesting to see how they maneuver all of this and where the pieces fit and where Tocchet thinks, what the best fit for the top 6. And I mean, the only line that seems to be staying where it is that third line. And I mean, maybe at some point, whether it's in the regular season or the playoffs, if things get desperate enough, that you even move some of those guys around and see if they can't get other players going. Because the one thing that line does that I really wish the other 2 lines did better was cycle. That third line cycles the puck beautifully. They play off each other so well. I mean, it is Sedin-like how well they cycle that puck. And they cycle to create, just like the Sedins did. They'll be patient. They don't mind recycling the puck back down low, and they'll wait for their opportunities. And, they play off each other really well. Something that I wish that the top 2 lines could do a little bit better. At times they have, but it's not been as consistent as that third line has.
Yeah. Are you guys surprised that Tocchet moved Lindholm off of PD's wing as quickly as he did? Like, yeah, I thought he'd at least give it, 4 or 5 games and just stick it together, because I think one of the biggest criticisms that a lot of people have had this year is finding a winger for PD, right? Besser and Miller, that seems to be like a staple. Obviously, you've got Bluger, Joshua, and Garland. Petey had Mikheyev, he had Kuzmenko. Obviously, for whatever reason, they've just never clicked. Are you guys surprised that Tocchet moved Lindholm off of that line as quickly as he did? I think it was like the third game he had Lindholm playing with Besser and Miller, which again, hey man, if it works, great. But I was a little bit surprised that he didn't give a little bit more runway for PD and Lindholm to kind of find a groove together.
Yeah, I think maybe there's something there. He's still trying to figure out who goes where. I think Hoglander doing what he's doing as well, scoring in 3 straight. It's kind of stapled him next to PD a little bit right now. I mean, I think Lindholm's going to end up back on that line. I think we're going to see Lindholm, Pettersson, Hoglander together as a unit as we go down the stretch here. I think as well. I mean, this is just it's only been like a handful or 2 of games. I mean, this was a trade that happened while I was sitting in a brewery in Arequipa. And I was like, well, I got to stay in this brewery right now because they got Wi-Fi, and I cannot go anywhere until I hear the return on this deal. But I think I think I mean, obviously, right now with that third line the way it is, and Lindholm's a great center too, but you kind of have to have him either with Petey or with Miller, and likely playing the wing. But he's a great guy to have out there to flip around if a guy gets kicked out of the faceoff circles as well. You're not going to put Lindholm on the 4th line. I think they're still trying it out, sheltering him a bit, getting him used to it. I think when the Canucks come home and they've got some very long home stretches coming up, when he can get more line matchups going on, I think you're going to see more Lindholm with Pettersson there. I think part of the reason that they moved him onto Miller's line there is being on the road as well, and with the matchups, it gives them a little more aggressiveness in the face-off circle with they put Miller and Lindholm out there. But I do think the long-term plan is, at least the way I see it right now, I think Lindholm, Petey, and Hogg stays together, and then I don't know who with Miller and Besser, and maybe that's a spot that Kessel could eventually jump into. Maybe Suter. I don't know. I thought Suter looked really good in there as well. So, and now, it's fun having all these options, like you guys said, though.
I mean, I wasn't surprised. I mean, a couple of things. One, I mean, very little practice time on the road. So again, like any opinion on how Lindholm has played has to be put in proper perspective, that he hasn't really had much time with this team, certainly not a lot of practice time with this team. And as we head down the stretch here, the Canucks start having, the Canucks, I believe, played their next 2 at home and then go on the road for 3 more. I think they go down to California for 3 more, or into that area anyway, and then come back home. And then I believe that's when the top-heavy home schedule begins to head down the stretch. I think that might be the beginning of their 9-game homestand. So that's going to give them more opportunities, more practice time to get him acclimated. And I'm pretty sure what Tocchet was just trying to do is just see, hey, can he forge some instant chemistry with somebody in the top 6? Because what he's looking for is he's looking for that pairing. What duo works? Can Petey and Lindholm be that duo? I mean, the question right now is Petey and Hoglander that duo. I mean, and Lindholm being that running mate. So, I mean, again, it's just, they're just trying things, seeing what works, seeing what may not work. And the nice thing is you still got, a quarter of the season left to try to figure this all out. And which is why Rutherford likes to get deals done as early as he does. So the player can get acclimated and they can find the fit that works. So, it'll be interesting. You got 2 home games here, one against the Red Wings, and then, I think one that we're all interested in watching on Saturday night against Winnipeg, which was the one, not to look past the Red Wings. I mean, a really tough opponent, but just in terms a really good team within your own conference that you haven't played, and especially a style that you want to see how this Canucks team matches up against. I mean, I don't really care about it being like a litmus test or anything like that. To me, it's just to see how the styles work. How do the Canucks go up against a team that is the most stout defensive team in the NHL? That really does wait for you to make mistakes and then pounces. Can the Canucks work their way to the inside? Can they keep the turnovers through the neutral zone to a minimum, which is what Winnipeg wants? They want you to do something stupid so they can create in transition. So it'll be interesting. I mean, Lindholm again. I'm going to give him time. We've got more than enough time. We've got 25 or so more games to see what where he best fits and where he can find a spark with whoever that is in the top six.
Yeah. An interesting thing about the Canucks here is they have no more games. I believe it was J-Pat that tweeted this out. They have no more games in the Eastern time zone.
No.
So the farthest they go.
I've been posting that for weeks, Doug. Come on.
Okay. Winnipeg and Minnesota were the two.
No, it's a J-Pat.
Was it you? I thought I saw it was J-Pat, but my bad.
that they finished their 4 road trips in the Eastern time zone 13-5-2.
So just with that,
Minnesota and it's Minnesota and
Colorado
Winnipeg are the farthest,
and
Colorado, sure, but but as far the east they'll have to go, right?
So after
Minnesota, Winnipeg,
after this 2-game homestand, they go and they play Minnesota, Colorado.
Okay, so it's not California. It's more.
After that, the Canucks have 24 games left. Out of those 24 games, they do not, except for the very last game against Winnipeg, they do not leave this time zone or mountain time. And only 4 of those games are in mountain time. The others are all on Pacific time. They barely leave this time zone after this little mini 2-game road trip. And like I said, the only time they leave more than 1 hour is the very last game of the season, which in all likelihood, both teams are going to be resting a bunch of guys anyways at that period. So after this 4-game stand, 20 of the Canucks' last 24 games 19 of their last 24 games are in the Pacific time zone.
Yeah,
and I'm trying to
stolen valor there. Sorry, the stolen valor of the tweet. I didn't mean. I saw it with somebody. I wasn't paying attention, but no, it was great. It was really good. Yeah, but no, it was a really, really good point. I was like, wow, we're still a quarter left in the season, and they don't play any more games in the Eastern time zone, and the farthest east they have to go is Minnesota, Winnipeg. That's huge because we know so many teams, especially out west, they do twice the amount of traveling as the teams out east have to do. So that is really good for the Canucks heading into the playoffs.
And part of the beauty of having teams in Seattle and Vegas now.
And I said, I posted this before. I mean, the Canucks only have 2 back-to-backs left to end their season. They play coming up here on this next road trip. They play Minnesota, Colorado, which will be a really tough back-to-back coming up on their next road trip. And then later on in the season, more into April, at the beginning of April, they go Vegas to Arizona, which will be another tough test as well. But then from there on out, they don't have any back-to-backs, whereas Edmonton have, I believe, 7 more back-to-backs. They just played their first back-to-back. It was Anaheim to Los Angeles, I believe is what it was. And they obviously lose 4-0 to Los Angeles. Their schedule gets tough, and I believe Edmonton has 2 more Eastern road trips left. So they have this 5-game. They have their 5 games in hand on the Canucks, but those 5 games come at the expense of a much more condensed and difficult schedule. They go to Boston, Columbus, Buffalo, and Pittsburgh. Coming up here in March, followed by they have to do the Toronto, Ottawa, Winnipeg stretch later on in March. So 2 Eastern road trips in March for Edmonton, and 7 back-to-backs to end their season. So, I mean, from a Canucks perspective, it does give you a little bit, a slight bit of, I mean, again, it really depends on how you play, but it still does give you a little bit of an advantage as you head toward the playoffs that you're not playing as much. And so It gives you opportunities to rest players. It gives you opportunities to not necessarily have to have Demko playing as much. I mean, especially because you would assume that their schedule will have him, will have DeSmith playing a little more, so he's going to have even more rest between games. And so, they got through the gauntlet of their schedule, in terms of just the spreading out of when they play, and they've done well. And now they're getting into a little more comfortable in terms of scheduling, even if the opponents are tougher.
Yeah.
36-12-6 after 54 games. That's the most games in their division.
I totally saw that coming.
That's really, really impressive. And it is, and I mean, 5 games in hand on the Oilers. That is a much tougher schedule in terms of travel and condensedness that the Oilers have there. Man, it's crazy that we're at this point still. Like it is still even like last night watching the game, I'm like, it's kind of got back to that mindset in like 2011 and 12 or 2010 and 11 12 when you just expect the team to win. Like you go and you're watching the game, it's like, oh yeah, Chicago, we're gonna beat Chicago. And I haven't felt that way in a long time. And you normally, even last year or whatever, you'd still be like, oh fuck, we better beat Chicago, man, otherwise I'm not going to hear the end of this. And they look like a team. Like it's just fun right now. And he had in Phil Kessel down there. You had in Lindholm. It's fun.
Yeah, I mean, really, no one could have foreseen this coming. I mean, it's and to me, like it's what when I was watching the last few years, and I mean, people who follow me on Twitter can attest to this kind of stuff that I mean,
I follow you on Twitter.
There you follow me on Twitter, exactly right.
Yeah. Apparently, I don't because I wasn't paying attention.
Apparently, I'm JPad according to you, right? No.
Yeah,
JPad very well could have posted.
Doug's still logging in with his Netscape browser and trying to find Twitter.
But just
Jeeves.
But just the way they would lose games in the years previous to this, where it just felt they would lose games in dumb ways, where their puck management was so poor and defensively they were so poor, and it's just what I had always hoped that I would see. Now, again, I didn't expect what I would see to this extent, but I firmly expected if they played well defensively and managed the puck better, that the games that we were watching where they would lose so dumb, where you'd just be like, what are you doing? That you could turn those games around and find ways to win them. And add into that, when you're playing a more predictable game, it puts your goalie in a better position. So it's not surprising. Demko was a really good goalie when this team was chaos all over the ice. He was a good goalie. So the question is how good was he going to be when this team decided to stop playing that way and gave him a little more support, and the forwards gave the defense more support, and what we've seen is a brand of hockey that probably the biggest misnomer that I heard when you'd mentioned structure was that this team was going to be boring. Well, that's been far the furthest thing from the truth. This team is playing with structure, and they're still, I would argue, way more fun to watch when they weren't, when we were sitting there ripping our hairs out wondering what they were doing. So from that point of view, yes, the record is shocking, but the ability to play better defensively, to manage the puck better, and have that lead to better results, for me, is probably the least shocking thing in all of this. Is that it has allowed them to stay in games, and when you have great goaltending and elite goal scoring, and then goal scoring spread out through your lineup, you're going to win more often than you're going to lose.
So one thing,
and the Canucks have.
Sorry, go ahead. You go. You go ahead, Doug. It's your turn. I wanted to touch on something.
No, I was just going to say the other thing. The Canucks have played 54 games this year, and the longest losing streak they've had all year is 2 games. That's been multiple times this year, obviously, but the longest losing streak this team has had all year is 2 games. They have 4-point lead over Boston for the overall standings in the league. They got 78. Boston has 74. The Bruins have a game in hand. They don't when they do have a bad outing, and the Boston game was definitely a bad outing.
which you're going
They
to
don't
have.
let-
Let's remind
Of course,
right? You're gonna have those.
And, you can argue that the Detroit game was a bit of a letdown, too. They still got it to overtime. Being awarded a penalty shot in overtime's a little ridiculous. You can argue one way or the other whether or not that should have been a penalty shot. But they don't let the losses bring them down. It's a new day. And just like they don't get too overhyped when they have a big win. How many times in a post game have you heard Quinn Hughes, be interviewed and he says, hey, look, yeah, it was a really big win. We're happy, but we're focusing on the next game. We have a long way to go. There's still 30 games left in the season. We've got playoff aspirations. We're focused on the end goal, not, we just shit kick the Rangers in New York. And you love that. And I think that mentality with this group in particular has been missing up until this season. And I do think coaching staff, management, and just the players themselves, I think Quinn Hughes, Petey, Miller, Debco, they've all been tired of losing. And I think this year they all kind of, they were challenged by Tocchet in the offseason, Besser as well. I'll put him in there as, hey, you better come into training camp ready and prepared because you're going to prove to me, that you're ready to kind of get the job done this year. And 99% of the players did exactly that.
Yeah, it's the whole off-season approach and the way Tocchet was interacting with players and setting the tone right from the get-go. And, I agree with not getting too high or too low. That's been a great thing. We've touched a bit about forwards and goaltending here, and we got a couple of things. I got to keep this quick because we still got we got to talk about what's going on with your background there, Brendan. And we also got to get to our 3 stars of the month for January. I know it's a little delayed here. We're 2 weeks into February, but this is our first one. So, but I just wanted to quickly touch on Nikita Zadorov gets suspended for his hit on Lucas Raymond. I'm okay with it. Whatever. It's a suspension, hit to the head. But the Canucks the last 2 games had often a pairing of Juulsen and Friedman on the bottom pairing, and they didn't look out of place. And this is something that for me has been very fundamental to the Canucks season. Noah Juulsen was pretty horrible to start the year. And now I feel that Noah Juulsen might be the best Canuck at boxing guys out and pushing them into the corners. He has just done a fantastic job. And a guy that I thought we needed to upgrade on is now a guy who I think is a very serviceable third pairing defenseman. And Friedman comes in after not playing for 28 games and does an admirable job. And he'll lose his spot in the lineup with Zadorov coming back. But just wanted to give a shout out with, we talk about Tocchet a lot, but Foote and Gonchar, what they have done with this blue line and how the blue line has bought into it, having 2 Hall of Famers coaching them and teaching them what to do. I think look no further than what Juulsen has done this season and how he's turned it around. And look at Friedman, even the last 2 games. This is a fan base that would take any chance to destroy a guy like Tyler Myers. We haven't talked a lot about Tyler Myers this year. Sure, he's getting paid more than we'd like, but we're not here at the end of every game talking about Tyler Myers. He's slow. He's a pylon. He's taking dumb penalties. He's keeping his elbows up. They've toned him down, which is a pretty hard thing to do in this market. So as much as Tocchet is getting a lot of accolades, what he's been doing with his blue line has been really impressive. And with that, Brendan, what is going on behind you? You said before we went on, you got it's a lesser known Canuck. I can't see the number there.
So if you if you're listening to us audio wise and not video wise, go over to YouTube. I'd love to see if anyone could possibly guess who this is. I've already gotten Matt Sundin, which, you know what, as I looked at it, I'm like, yeah, I guess I could see how that is. But this is a random Canuck from the early 2000s on a trade made by Brian Burke. It was one of those trades. Brian Burke was always good at what one thing that he would love to do was sort of in the middle of the season and when the team was scuffling a little bit. Back when there was no salary cap, when you could make deals a little more readily than you may be able these days. But he'd like to make a deal just to, mix things up and give the dressing room a little bit of a shakeup. And this guy here was one of the guys that he traded for.
Looks European to me.
He is not European. I'll tell you that right now.
Oh, snap. I'm out.
What I would say is people, if they watch this on YouTube, they should comment with their guesses on who they think it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we'll do that, and you can tell me off the air because
This gentleman is from Thunder Bay, Ontario.
it doesn't help.
No, it doesn't. What do you think? I'm just going to give you the answer.
All right. Thunder Bay. All right.
How many? I'll see how many games did he play for the Canucks. He actually played a decent amount for the Canucks. He played 120 games for the Vancouver Canucks.
Oh, okay, that's
had a grand total of what did he have? 18 goals and 25 assists. So 43 points in 120 games as a Vancouver Canuck.
Huh.
So and a plus 10 for those who really give a shit about that, but that's what he was.
Oh wow.
All right.
Decent player. He played from the Canucks from 2001 in the 2001, 2002, and 2002-2003 seasons. So there you go.
Huh. Could you tell us any other teams, or would that be too obvious?
No, I don't think it'd be too obvious because I think this guy's random enough that I don't even think it would be that. His first team he played for, this really won't give it away, was the Phoenix Coyotes, formerly known as the Phoenix Coyotes.
Wow.
That's the first team he played for?
That is the first team he played for. Yeah. And I could give you the rest. And then after Vancouver, he went to Columbus and then to Carolina, finished his career in Carolina.
Jeez Louise, those are like markets that I just can't think of anybody.
I think I have a guess, but if we want to get people to comment,
sure, you can tell me when the show's out. You can tell me who you think it is. But
you have a guess now.
But I just want to say, hey Pete, have I been pronouncing his name wrong? Is it Noah Juulsen? Are we going with the Nordic pronunciation of his name, the Scandinavian? Is it Juulsen?
I don't know. That's always what I thought it was, but I wouldn't listen to me because I always get stuff wrong. So I don't know. But I figure a double U kind of gives it a different flavor.
But I'll just say before we go into the design, I mean, I remember just because I was just looking at the Canucks, just going back here and what they've done through this year. I remember. When they lost that game to New Jersey, that one at home, that I think it was 6-5 loss.
I was at that game.
Yeah, that would have been a tough one to be at.
Yeah, so was I.
And I just remember thinking to myself, "Oh God, here we go," and this is where they fall back down to earth, where they just look so scratched. And thinking, God, now we're going to get to double-digit losses, and this is just going to start looking worse and worse. But I mean, if you look at it, that was their 9th loss, and that was December 5th, game number 26. That was their 9th loss. Since then, they've only lost 3 regulation games in their last 27 games. 28 games, I should say.
That's pretty amazing.
Pretty ridiculous that this team has gone on that kind of, like, what was it, 23. It would be their record since then would be 23, 3, and 5. Not too bad, guys. Not too bad.
Not bad.
And again, I know we need to get to the 3 stars, but one last quick question. Does the player share the same initials of an iconic retired Canuck?
Oh my God.
I think Doug, I think you might know who it is.
Nice.
I think you might know who it is. I think you've got the answer.
All right.
And the funny thing is, I think if you don't know, if you can't figure out who, I mean, I don't know if that'll necessarily help others because it is one of those sort of random players that played for the Canucks for a decent stretch, but still at an era where you're just kind of like, it's so far gone that you might forget that he actually did, or forgot that who he was at all.
All right, well, I'm going to stew on that a bit too. But yeah, we got to get to our 3 stars here very quickly. I know it's 2 weeks old. So this is based off of January, not games in the last 2 weeks at all. Let's get into our 3 stars of the month for January. And I actually have the tallied points finally. So at the end of this, I'll tell you guys who is currently leading the 3 stars of the month.
Doug. I guess, I'll start her out here. So my third star for the month of January is going to be the captain, Quinn Hughes. Hughes had 2 goals, 15 assists for 17 points. My second star for the month of January. Don't know why people have been very critical of this player lately. It feels like I'm in the twilight zone here, but it's Elias Pettersson. Pettersson had 14 goals, 7 assists for 21 points, led the team in scoring for the month of January, was an absolute machine. And the first star for me for the month of January, without a doubt, is Thatcher Demko. He played 10 games, went 9-1, 2 shutouts, had a 0.926 save percentage. My 3 stars: Quinn Hughes 3, Elias Pettersson 2, Thatcher Demko 1.
All right. Mine pretty similar to you, but a little bit different as well. Third star of the month, second on the team in points for it, JT Miller. Again, just his usage and how much how many different situations he was getting used there. I thought Miller got number 3. I gave Demko number 2, 9-1 record, 2 shutouts. He had a fantastic stretch there. Number 1, Petey averaged over a goal a game, 14 goals in 13 games, 21 points. So Petey gets my first star of the month. Brandon, you're 3 going back to January.
Thank you for letting me go last, because now I can go through the stats here and figure this out.
We did that on purpose.
Yeah, thank you. So, yes. Who knew I would be the one that was least prepared, right? My third star, JT Miller. During that road trip that took them back east through the east, where the Canucks, for the first time in their history, swept the Devils, Rangers, and Islanders in the same road trip. A lot of that due to the bringing back together of the Lotto line. And both Petey and Miller were fantastic. So JT Miller, my third star. Elias Pettersson, my second star. I mean, again, the forming of that line, and he really took off and had what was a pretty sensational stretch there. And my first star, Thatcher Demko. What can you say? I think there was some seesawing between him and Connor Hellebuck as to who is the front runner for the Vezina Trophy. Now I believe that he's firmly wrestled that back as he came close as recently. And this does flood into February, but he did tie a Canuck record with 9 straight victories, a record held with one Daniel Kluche.
So, updates for the Barfly Golden Pint Award, the much coveted Barfly Golden Pint Award in its second season. I'm going to give you the list. There's 8 Canucks that have received points so far this season. Quinn Hughes is currently leading the pack. He's got 17. Pettersson's got 13. Miller and Demko both have 10. Besser and Bluger both have 6. Joshua has 3, and Hronek has 1. So those are the 8 Canucks that are on the board for the Canucks Speakeasy Barfly Golden Pint Award, the much coveted, even though we don't actually have a physical award.
And yeah, that they don't really get anything for it, but except for our hearty respect, right?
Respect. That's for sure. If folks are wondering, Pettersson won it last year, and 10 Canucks were on the board for last year's. So, anyways, there you go. We got 2 or 3 more months, 4, or well, hopefully 5. We just keep on going. We'll get a few more in here and see who wins it. All right, guys, we're a bit over, so I think it's time to go into the free pour.
All right, and I'll start us off with a movie soundtrack album. So this movie, for those who haven't seen and aren't watching on YouTube, it's from the 90s. It's a movie called Judgment Night, starring Emilio Estevez, Cuba Gooding Jr., Jeremy Piven, a young Jeremy Piven, I believe, is in it as well, from Entourage fame. But this soundtrack was really cool. It was kind of the first time we saw the melding of rock and rap. You have bands like Sonic Youth doing a song with Cypress Hill, which I think is amazing. There's so many good Del Funky Homo Sapien and Dinosaur Jr., which is one of my all-time favorite
Dinosaur
bands.
Jr. Nice.
Yes, one of my all-time favorites. You got Sir Mix-a-Lot and Mudhoney doing a song together. This was
Seattle.
I love this movie, but this soundtrack, man, the Judgment Night soundtrack, I don't think we talk about it enough. And it's kind of like, just after Aerosmith and Run DMC did the Walk This Way kind of crossover, this album, all original songs, incredible. If you've never listened to the Judgment Night soundtrack or watched the movie, do yourself a favor.
I'll put that on tomorrow. You also forgot about Public Enemy and Anthrax, or Public Enemy with a Slayer sample as well. Public Enemy did a bit of stuff there too. For me, I was away for a month there. It was killer. If this podcast was another 2 hours long, I would tell you all about the trip. But I'll just give you kind of a quick little synopsis. I was in Peru and Bolivia, and it was freaking amazing. Two really cool countries. I hadn't been to South America in a long time. It's just a place that I just kept getting distracted by other parts of the world. This winter, flights dropped drastically to South America. So I said, all right, just going down by myself. As always, before any trip, I get a little bit nervous because that's just what I do, even if it's places I've gone to before. But right away, I felt safe the whole time. I had a great time. I only got food poisoning once. I had some buses canceled. Other than that, though, everything else was fantastic. Two great countries. Can't recommend them enough. Great food, great people, great weather, tons of culture, tons of great breweries, too. The beer is pretty good. If you really want to hear more about it, probably best to meet me for a beer and let me chew your ear off. Brendan, what do you
got? No, Doug, I'm not doing the passing of Carl Weathers, but rest in peace, Carl Weathers. That's an iconic actor, obviously. The Chiefs had their Super Bowl parade today, and I think us as Canadians who don't have to put up with what they have to put up with down there, just sit back here and aghast at the fact that we have another another shooting, and in fact, there was a school shooting as well. 2 mass shootings today. One in Georgia, and obviously the one in Kansas City in Missouri. It's frustrating. It really is. And I don't have the answers, but what I do know is doing nothing hasn't helped the situation. And when you have a shooting like that, where I think it was 11 children shot. Like, are you kidding me? And you're sitting there and telling me that, oh my God, I send my prayers. I mean, fuck off. It's clear you don't want to do anything. Just say you don't want to do anything, because you haven't, and people continue to die. And hopefully this comes out of that. No one has died. I haven't heard any updates recently. I know there were a lot of people going to hospital in critical condition. So let's wish the best for all of them. But it's just getting ridiculous. And again, for those people who rag on Canada, and think this is one of the worst places to live, hey, give your head a shake. You could do a lot worse than this. I think we live in a pretty damn good country. We may not agree politically with everything that our politicians do, but and we do wish things were slightly more affordable, but we could be living in far worse situations than we did. And I think a little bit of humble and gratitude and perspective is what some people in this country truly need, because I watch what's going on in other places and I'm thinking, God, I have it pretty good. So it's just disappointing. It's happened again. It's going to happen again inevitably, because it just keeps happening. And hopefully it'll come a day where somebody stands up and says enough is enough, and let's figure this out. It's not going to happen. It's not going to be fixed quickly. It's going to take a lot of time, but for the good of their country, for the good of the young people, the people who aren't born yet, it's better that they begin to figure this out now, and hopefully, at least stop. If you can stop one of these, it'll be worth it.
And just a footnote to that as well: 800 armed cops in Kansas City, hundreds of armed civilians. The whole idea that guns protect people just doesn't work. So I pray for change. Thanks for tuning in, folks. This is season 5, episode 17, number 163 overall. If you want more of us, I mean, you should. You can also follow us out there on some of the socials. I'm at Pete_Gas on the site formerly known as Twitter that Doug loads on his Netscape over there. And also, we have a podcast account that someone or something operates. That's at Canucks Speak on the same platform.
You can give me a follow on Twitter at Doug Venn. And we have been building a playlist on Apple Music and Spotify since the inception of this podcast. Every funky jam we've ever used for every outro, outside of a couple that just aren't online. Give that a follow as well. If you need to get through your work week and you don't know what to put on music wise, check out the Canuck Speakeasy outro playlist.
It's very good.
And I'm Brendan, aka Jabo, live from my Commodore 64 at Jabo_Vancouver. That's JABO. We are on YouTube as well. Hit that subscribe button and go on there and see if you can guess who that player is that was for the first 50 or so minutes. Who is it? Pete doesn't know.
I don't.
Doug, I think, does know, but we'll see, because we're sure as hell not telling you. You guys have to figure that out. So figure it out and let us know who that is. And you get absolutely nothing except for our praise if you find out.
Wow, just like our Golden Barfly award that we give out. All right, folks, we'll be back next week, and we'll see what happens with Phil the Thrill. We'll see what happens with the Canucks at home. Should be some good times. Until then, hasta luego.